Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And as you listen into this recording or watching this live, I would like to thank you for being here, present, with your willingness to learn about the kaleidoscope of emotions. My name is Darya Haitoglou. I'm a psychologist and the director of Virginia Satir Institute in the UK, London. Today's topic is very dear to my heart because it was one of the first courses that I have put together and offered based on the 21-day challenge on how to transform different negative emotions into more positive ones and how to look at them from a different perspective, as well as how to experience more joy and more happy ones rather than the difficult ones. And then it turned into a chapter of a book on called Enrich, a practical guide to have more love, abundance, fulfillment, and happiness. And I've written a lot of notes. So I'm going to be peeking into my notebook because I've got a lot to share with you today. So first, it's going to be just a little monologue, but hopefully you can reflect and have your notepads and notebooks, journals, because we are all in here in an emotional kaleidoscope, right? We're all experiencing these emotions. Most of the time, we don't even know what kind of emotions we're going to experience, depending on which stage of life we are, what kind of context we are, where we are physically, where we are emotionally, in which relationship, who's coming to have a conversation with us, what kind of challenge we're experiencing, what kind of work we do, how are we with our body and what is our relationship with this body, how are we with our mind and what is our relationship with our mind and our thoughts, and all of these and much more, spiritual level and also nutritional level, right, exercise level, different kinds of levels and different kinds of triggers. They impact and affect what kind of a kaleidoscope we have. We turn it, and sometimes it's unexpected. We see the different colors, different forms and shapes. That's why I call it kaleidoscope, because most of the time we are running our life because of our emotions. And, I was thinking, how can we, if we're anyway a subject of our emotions, why can't we just have more of those positive ones, the juicy ones, the interesting ones, the ones that actually bring us more joy and more happiness rather than pain and suffering? So when I looked at the emotions from a psychological standpoint, but also biology, that's a very interesting kind of correlation. And what I noticed is that emotions, especially negative ones, they are connected in a way to hormones. So when we look at the very base, the basic emotion that drives our behavior is the emotion of fear. And fear is, when we experience this emotion, we have the hormone called adrenaline that's part of our system, and adrenaline is a very strong hormone that's produced by adrenaline glands. And when we experience this emotion of fear on a chronic level, then our adrenal glands overproduce and get tired. So we have adrenal fatigue. It can be because of stress, it can be because our nervous system is just bombarded, or it could be because it is part of our family patterns. There's been a traumatic event. It could be many, many reasons. And that's something that I would like to also share with you today and do something practically to change this emotion. And when I work with clients that go through the Emotional Kaleidoscope program, we always start with this emotion of fear, because fear is it's a very interesting one. It does not allow any other emotions sort of, it's like a gate, it sits there, and if it's not resolved, it turns, or it exacerbates the following negative emotions. So if fear is not resolved, and if we're not working with the fear, it turns into anger, and the anger is driven by a hormone called noradrenaline, and it's sort of like a spiral. It becomes stronger. If anger is not resolved, it turns into sadness. Sadness is run by a hormone called melatonin, and if sadness is not resolved properly, it turns into disgust, and disgust is run by a hormone called acetylcholine. So all of this is like sort of a vicious circle of this negative emotions. And in order for us to experience more positive ones, we need to look into the fear first, because that's the starting point. Now, side notes, all emotions are useful. They all have their place in our life, in our behavior, in our family systems, where we come from, in our cultures. And I call them emotions are triggers for motion. So it is something that allows us to look into something that's not working. And when we follow these emotions, we find the root cause, something that we need to change. And otherwise, we don't change if we don't experience pain, if we don't experience negative emotions. So they are very useful markers, triggers for us to look into our life, our behavior, ourselves, our relationships, our context, our environment, if we need to change something. Now, our goal when we work with emotions is always to listen and to find out what's behind that emotion. And what are our body sensations during that emotion? Because sometimes we experience different kind of sensations associated with that emotion. So we're gonna do today a couple of very interesting exercises. Is the way how I deal with emotions, how I offer to my clients around the world to deal with their tough emotions. So our awareness allows us to then look at different aspects of our life. And different authors call it differently. Some call it emotional agility, or emotional intelligence, or emotional stability, emotional balance, emotional health, emotional awareness, emotional zen. I mean, there's so many different names. And what it is it's a practice, right? What we want is to become aware of our emotions. We want to recognize and name them to tame them. It's a very helpful and scientifically proven strategy in order to deal with difficult emotions. And then we want to change them slowly, sometimes radically, sometimes it depends on what kind of emotions, but generally there are a tiny wins that we're looking for, because emotions are very, very strong kind of patterns. We are prone to experience one or two very strong emotions consistently throughout life. For example, we know from the systemic psychologists that it's either anger as a emotion, or the feeling that we experience as a coping strategy to protect us from experiencing stress, or it is emotion of sadness, right? Or emotion of fear, right? Or emotion of disgust, or shame and guilt, which is a combination. We will talk about it. It's a cocktail of the basic emotions. So same as jealousy, for example, or envy. It's not a simple kind of feeling or emotion. These are cocktails that consist of separate different feelings and emotions combined together, and that's why they are very difficult to deal with. But we're going to do something about it today. If you're here, if you're paying attention, and if you stay focused and make notes to apply to your life, something that you're going to learn today. Maybe you've already learned something from hearing what I've just shared. Now, what I do with emotions generally is apply the enrich method that I created based on the Satir model and the systemic psychology. The enrich method it's an abbreviation of different concepts that are connected to different hormones. So what we want is to rebalance that inner cocktail of hormones into more positive ones. So for example, explore, E letter in the enrich method, is all about finding out, let's take fear, for example. What is fear? Yeah? Understanding it, exploring it, looking through the lens, getting closer to it, because fear has killed many more dreams than failure did, right? So fear is the one that protects us from doing something that is really good for us potentially, because when we first my husband and I met, he told me, behind your deepest fears lie your biggest dreams. I was like, wow, that's powerful, because I was always hiding away and running away from my fears. But suddenly, as I changed the perspective on fears, I started getting closer to them. So something that I got scared about or fearful about, I started practicing step by step, little by little, more and more. And suddenly I realized that there was no fear anymore. And as I was getting closer, I was just asking myself, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? Because generally it's the fear that prevents, it's not the reality that is so scary. It's most of the time our brain that projects certain things onto reality and affects the way how we live life. Fear is very much, if it could be an entity, is scared of uncertainty, for example. But the amount of uncertainty we could hold, or the amount of uncertainty we hold, is in direct proportion to the quality of life we can have, right? So the more uncertainty we can have in our life, the better the quality of our life is. That's most of successful people would abide to this, because certainty is the antidote to growth. When we want to have only certain things that we know, only familiar things that we know, we don't grow as much. Growing is risk-taking, is learning something new, is going outside of our comfort zone, is pushing the boundaries, is finding the way that is not comfortable and going there. So that is an act of being scared, but do it anyway. Feel fear and approach it, go towards it. And step by step, that fear disappears and gives space to something else. Normally, it's a curiosity that is an antidote to fear. So that's an exploration part, right? So we find out, what is fear? Well, it could be, I just thought of a few examples. Let's start with a small one. For example, it's not really a fear, but I put examples of, why is it, for example, untidy room, unhealthy communication, body health, and work on purpose. Well, maybe it's about different choices. Let's take another example for the fear. For example, fear of public speaking. Normally, fears are public speaking, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of spiders or snakes, fear of death, fear of loss and separation, and fear of loneliness and pain. So we choose a different fear. For example, public speaking. I had that. For a long time, I thought, okay, who am I to speak in front of many people? Who am I to teach them something that they might already know, or they can read from books? And of course, behind that was a fear of speaking publicly, which is an innate fear. It has biological base for it. And most people on our planet have that fear, okay? So what is this fear about? It's about self-preservation, not to be in front of people because they might know things about me personally that might create problems for me, for my family. They might feel angry or feel bad about me. They will know me. They might do something with my family afterwards. It's irrational most of the time, but it's also combined with the fear of failure to say something that is going to be ridiculed by others or not accepted, right? This fear is biologically wired in us. We are shy and we want to keep it to ourselves most of the time, to do our little journey in our cave, from cave to cave, not to be seen, not to be eaten, not to be targeted. So this is something that many people, especially introverted people, prefer. Now, how does it affect our life? How did it affect my life? Well, it kept me quite small because I didn't go to a stage. I didn't go to internet in front of other people. I didn't create any videos. I didn't create any social media. I was just hiding in my cubicle at work in a corporation, but I was doing my work during the day, and I was just dreaming and looking at other people who were doing a great job, but I was scared to put myself out in front of other people. So exploration is all about understanding more about the fear, okay? Knowing and accepting the fact that it may be not just me personally, but it may be universal. Now, the second part of the Enrich method is about nourishing on different levels. So we first need to nourish body, mind, soul in order for us to raise our self-esteem, so we can then approach the same feeling, the same emotion, and have a different kaleidoscope, have a different picture, have a different experience, have a different body sensation. And when we nourish our body with the right exercise, for example, when we put ourselves in a different state of mind, for example, pumping our body with very strong energy, movement, and exercise, and music, and jumping, and affirming, and proclaiming, and making ourselves feel more confident, more fearless, writing down things that will happen if we do certain things, if we go towards our fear, creating a state that is different rather than a fearful state. We get more, not just nourished, but we change the hormones, and we get more serotonin, we get more endorphins, we get more dopamine, and with more testosterone, because that's the focusing kind of hormone, can move us forward, can propel us and springboard us into an action. So nourishment is very, very important. And as part of the Emotional Kaleidoscope Challenge and the program that I offer, I challenge everybody to start an exercise routine. And I share my morning exercise routine physically, what I do 5 minutes a day, that they can do within 21 days and see how the body reacts and changes the hormones and changes the cocktail, so that our emotions also change. Emotions, they're like weather. They never stay static. They always change, especially in women's cycle. And what we experience is every day a different kind of emotion. So it's a great thing. So a bad emotion is not a bad life. It's not a bad year. It's just a bad day. Okay. It may be a bad hour, a bad moment. And when we look at it as a transient kind of system, of emotional representation, then it's much easier for us to deal with them. But if the emotion comes back again and again, it becomes a pattern, that's when we want to apply this Enrich method and deal with it and find the core, nourish our body, our mind, like you're doing now. You're learning something new. You may be participating in an activity that's nourishing your soul. Maybe you're exploring who you are. Maybe you're connecting with the right-minded people. And all of these nurturing and nourishing activities, they are helping you to change your hormonal balance. Looking after yourself, having a nice me time, or a beautiful spa moment, or just a positive kind of affirmation day, thinking positive thoughts. Barbara Fredrickson and Sonia Lyubomirsky, they research the power of positive thoughts, and they've written books on happiness and how we can change the way how we think. And there's a sort of a golden rule of 5 to 1, and 5 positive thoughts to 1 negative, in order for us to overcome our negative predisposition thinking and a negative mindset. We want to shift and be aware of how many positive thoughts we think and how many positive thoughts we think about ourselves or maybe about others versus negative. At first, we're always shocked how much negative stuff happens during the day. When sometimes we even think, oh, no, I'm a very positive person. But when we actually do the audit of our thoughts and count in a matter of minutes, and of course hours and days and a week, on average, how many thoughts we experience that are negative versus positive, the best case scenario is 50-50. Yeah. And these people think that they are very positive. No, this is actually a route to depression if we're not careful. We need to boost that 5 to 1 ratio. Okay, every negative thought. Okay, I need to find out 5 positives. It can be a thought about the past. It can be a thought about the future. It can be a thought about appreciating or feeling grateful what we already have, what we already do, who we already are. Even having a glass of water, or having fresh air, having electricity, having warm house, having a body, having a healthy body, having a healthy or maybe painless hour, just appreciating something, that is a positive thought. It's very, very good practice to start counting and thinking and becoming aware of how many positive thoughts I have during the day. So that is a nourishing act, okay, for the mind. Explore, nourish. The third one is R for respond. The respond is allowing us, in order to respond to that emotion of fear instead of react to it. Okay, very important part, and this is where the transformation happens. Okay, in the Enrich method, respond is all about learning how to soothe our nervous system and learn to cope with stress rather than going on overdrive and having that adrenaline and noradrenaline, and if we're not careful, melatonin and acetylcholine, all the negative emotions to the top. We want to reduce those chemicals and transform them into a better kind. Okay, it can be cortisol, it can be adrenaline, these are stress hormones, but they are fast and furious, I call them. Okay, we experience stress and then we relax. How animals are different from humans? They experience stress, then they shake it off, they forget about it. Okay, a frog who's trying to catch a fly may be stressed for a moment when it doesn't, but it sits there and it again uses its tongue to try to catch another fly, forgetting about all the previous failures or losses that she didn't catch that fly. Okay, so this is what we want to be like, is forgetting about the negative stuff in the past and focusing on the present moment and having a chronic positive in a cocktail rather than chronic negative, because chronic negative affects our adrenal glands, affects our nervous system, affects our brain, affects our body, affects our longevity. We want to live longer and happier, right? And in order for us to do that, we want to find the antidote. Okay, so the antidote to fear, for example, of public speaking. What is the antidote to fear? For me, is curiosity. Okay, curiosity is very, very strong as an antidote to fear. So as I find more about my curiosity, oh, interesting, I'm curious, what would happen if I just did a little thing, with my friends, for example, or what if I recorded and made a little training? What if I could create an opportunity for me to do public speaking, a small one. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I'm sweating. At the first time, I remember when I was doing it, and I had a big gig. I had to present in front of thousands of people when I worked in even in a corporate environment. Thousands of salespeople who are much older, much more mature, much more experienced than I was at that time, and I had to present something that I had to become expert in. Now, that propelled me. I got scared, but I also found an antidote. I got curious. What would make them like what I present, and how? What would bring them? It was not about me anymore. It was about what would serve them the best. What could I give them? What could I share? What could I do that was meaningful for them and will make their life better from that one encounter? And that suddenly shifted and moved the perspective, the focus away from me and all the negative things, but on a positive, goal-oriented antidote, curiosity. Okay, very, very important. Then after explore, nourish, respond, I in the word enrich stands for imagine. Imagine is much more powerful than will. Even Einstein said that, because it holds a key to our unlocking of our endorphins. Okay, when we imagine positive scenarios of our life, when we imagine, like I did, that positive, a curious thought, what would that audience feel great about, that they would love? What would you as an audience feel great about to learn about this topic? What could you present to somebody, if you're thinking of presenting, that they would love, that it would, if that's such an important thing, and how would it affect your life in the future? So a powerful NLP technique, neuro-linguistic programming technique, that is based also on the work that Virginia Satir did, is working with a projection into the future. So let's imagine two scenarios. One scenario is negative. For example, not even negative, nothing happens. So the fear of public speaking, as an example. I don't work on my fear of public speaking. I continue fearing speaking publicly, and I do nothing to change that. Let's imagine what would happen in my life in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 or 20 years' time. Well, my life will be maybe good, but a little bit mediocre, because I'll be doing pretty much the same thing that I've been doing. Maybe I'll be bored a little bit. Maybe I'll be not so much a role model to my children. I don't know, but it feels a little bit like sad and disappointing if nothing changes, because we are thriving. We're humans, like plants. We thrive when we grow. Now, on the other scenario, if I imagine myself changing and becoming really good at overcoming my fear of public speaking, actually speaking publicly more, right? And looking at the projected future, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now, what would happen to my life? What kind of impact will it have? Wow, I could help many more people change their lives for better. How important is it to me? Very important. How does it affect my life? Very much. It can help me also have influence, grow the reach, feel more certain, feel better about myself as well, professionally and personally. Be a better role model to my children and grandchildren. Do what I love with passion, with love, and get to the place where I want to be, because my heart wants to give more, and I will be able to give more. So you see, imagine, it's a very powerful exercise when it comes to working with emotions like fear. So after imagine these two scenarios, of course, the brain goes, oh, of course, it makes sense. Why would I stick to something that is mediocre, or something that is not joyful, or something that is not allow me to grow, or doesn't make my life better, doesn't contribute? Why would I stay? Oh, maybe I will go towards the scenario of positive one, and actually it will propel and motivate, inspire me to change that. and get closer to my fear of public speaking, for example. Then after imagine, C is for communicate. Okay, communication is just one of the tools that we must master. Okay, we all need to master the art of communication because it helps us also flood our system with lovely estrogens, lovely communication hormones, soothing our emotion, because communication, the art of communication, is something that we all can use to change the way how we work with our feelings and emotions. So, for example, if you are an auditory person, like you, for example, have when you think, you hear, yourself talking to yourself. I, for example, know that my husband, he's very much auditory, because I can sometimes even see him talking to himself, having that internal dialogue, right? This is an auditory kind of preference. You can use this to your advantage. You can communicate in a different way. Notice what kind of dialogue do you have with yourself? Going back to that 5-to-1 ratio. If you have communication, what would happen? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I good looking enough? Am I successful enough? Am I am I worthy? Am I good enough? Is generally a question. We are doubting ourselves in our internal dialogues, shaming, guilting ourselves, and doubting. Then it's a great practice to change the way we talk to ourselves. Now, how to do that? One of the great practice, very simple trick that we can use that voice and change, for example, the quality of it. It could be tonality. Yeah? Instead of like a high pitch voice, it can be a low pitch voice, or it can be change the speed when we hear that voice. Who are you, for example, or you're not good, or what a loser. A lot of the time people say, oh, damn it, I've done it again. Instead of that, change the speed of that voice. For example, make it very fast, or make it very slow. Oh, you're slow, you're a loser, right? And practice and experiment with that quality, with that characteristic of that auditory function, with that voice. It could be a very powerful change when we put a character tonality, for example, a Mickey Mouse voice, instead of our parent voice or our own critical judging voice. We turn it into Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck voice, and it becomes a funny kind of voice, and it's not as putting down, it's not as critical anymore. It becomes a bit humorous. That's a very powerful antidote. It's a very powerful little trick, communication trick for the auditory kind of preference. Okay. Now, if you're a visual person, when you think in pictures, for example, and you can communicate. Everybody communicates inside our brain, inside our mind, in a certain way, and there are predispositions. So we have auditory, we have visual, we have kinesthetic. Okay, so if you have more visual representation, when you think pictures, then you can work with these pictures. So what you can do, if, for example, a picture is imagine yourself on the stage and people sort of booing or throwing tomatoes or whatever. Try to move that image away from you, or make it smaller, right? Put it in a little frame, like a picture frame, and this way you can compartmentalize that your picture and change the feeling associated with that. We can change emotions, we can change our feelings, just the way how we communicate with ourselves. Okay, moving that picture away from us generally creates a better feeling. Okay, less fear, for example, more freedom, more joy, more curiosity. Okay, experiment, if you're a visual person, with this kind of images. If you're more sensory, more kinesthetic kind of person, then it's all about the quality, okay, of the material, of touch. Metaphorically, you can use, for example, if a fear is a damp, sort of wet, cold kind of substance, turn it into a fluffy, light, maybe what's the quality? Warm, huh? And that changes the feeling associated with that. Okay, fear suddenly starts feeling not as fearful. Okay, maybe it becomes a bit more familiar or friendly. That's a very interesting antidote to fear. If it becomes familiar and friendly, then we can come closer to it. We can hug it. Okay, and that comes as a last letter in the word enrich is hugs and humor. Hugs and humor is how to make fear, for example, fluffy and funny. It's the best antidote. So the more we hug and imagine and hugging that fear of whatever, public speaking, right? Hugging and making it funny, thinking of what the worst that can happen and make a joke about that possibility. And then notice what happens. The more you joke about that fear, the more you hug that fear, the better you will be at dealing with that. So that is a very interesting exercise that I invite you to do. As you hear, you're thinking, okay, that's great. Now, what is my fear? So first choose one that is not too much of a fear. Okay, let's practice and try something like maybe choose a project in the future that you've been postponing or you've been dreaming or thinking and not even attempting to do, and think of it and start exploring. What is it? What is it that stops me? Maybe it's a fear of failure. Maybe I'm scared to fail. Okay, but what's the worst that can happen? Okay, you fail. And that is a great experience that you can learn from. Okay, so what would it mean in my life? What kind of influence did it have in my life? Start with exploration. Then nourish your body, through exercise, nourish your mind, nourish your soul, elevate, meditate, affirm, do your rituals, your routines. Then learn how to respond. Respond is all about finding the antidote to that fear. Fear of failure, antidote. Again, curiosity, maybe it's your drive of freedom, it's a drive for success, it's a drive for fulfillment, drive for abundance. It's focusing on the right motivating factor rather than thinking about the failure possibilities. Okay, so how do you change the focus and you respond to that and you change the state in your body? Here we work with a tool called stasis kinesis, or stance and movement, stance dance. Remember the stances that I shared with you? One that's called blaming, turning into a peaceful warrior, or placating, turning into powerful tree, super reasonable, turning into humble monk, irrelevant, turning into a harmonizer, core harmonizer, and withdrawing, turning into world hugger. Okay, there's a previous presentation that you can watch on stasis kinesis. It's a wonderful practice on how to learn how to respond to any emotions, any feelings that you would like to transform and shift into a more positive one. Okay, and then from respond, you learn how to imagine two scenarios. The negative one, see into the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Ooh, the body and the mind will know straight away they don't want that. Okay, and once you imagine the positive scenario of what happens if you change that emotion, that feeling, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, what will happen in your life? And that will be the pull that drives the carriage. Okay, then from imagine, you learn how to communicate by changing the auditory, visual, or kinesthetic preferences and working with those images or sounds or touch elements, and how you communicate with yourself, and then hugs and humor to seal the deal. learn how to make it funny, how to make it fluffy, how to make it touchy, how to make it huggy, because when we hug, we produce a hormone called oxytocin, which is a trust hormone. We trust ourselves more. We take more risk to change our negative emotions, and we make different choices in our life in order to feel better and not to get stuck in our negative patterns and routines. So that's an example for you how I deal and I teach my clients to deal with their negative emotions. You can apply it to anger, for example, very powerfully. Same system in reach. So anger could be about, for example, you're in your relationship, something triggers you. Oh, what is it that triggers me to feel angry, right? Why does it trigger me to feel angry? And what and how does it affect my life? Exploration part. Nourish. The nourishment is an important one in different systems. For example, in Vedic system or Ayurveda offers a different doshas, right? An understanding of, for example, if you're a Pitta type, you need to eat less spicy food, for example, right? So nourishing your body according to the emotion and what you don't want to feel, yeah, you need to make sure that you balance that also, food and nourishment that you put inside your body. Your thoughts, right? How many thoughts do you allow, and to what point do you allow yourself in your anger journey? It can be the first frustration. It could be a rage, right? It's a spectrum. So how do you reduce that on a spectrum from rage into frustration, maybe irritation? So not necessarily completely eradicating anger, but use anger as a force for good, force for discipline, force for making things happen, force to motivate yourself, force to inspire yourself, but not to get chronically angry, because chronic anger burns, and it burns like fire. It can be very nourishing and warm, but it can also burn bridges. It can burn the relationship. It can burn our inside organs and create ulcers or some sort of stomach pain, heartburns, and indigestion, all sorts of complications in our somatic representation of anger. And chronic anger is not a pleasant thing. We want to move away from that. And naturally, there are so many things that we could do to soothe our anger and to catch it at a very early stage once we become aware of it. Nourish and then respond in a way, oh, I feel angry. Tame. Name it to tame it. I feel anger. So what do I need? To focus on something else. Oh, instead of anger, I would like to experience peace. Okay, what do I need for my peace? For my peace, I need space. So as I imagine myself more peaceful into the future, I can imagine the journey 20 years from now, what kind of relationships I have, what kind of environment, career choices, and also body, relationship to my body, and what kind of choices I make if I'm not angry, if I'm more peaceful, for example, right? And then how do I communicate to myself? How do I nurture lovingly? How do I become more kind and reflective and aware to myself so I can catch that anger at a very, very early stage in the development and allow to for my space, for example, to be on my own for 5 minutes, or to breathe slowly, to create space for the hypo, not hyper, but hypo breathing, like samadhi breathing, like almost no breathing. And that's soothes our nervous system. When we have CO2, most of the time we think CO2 is bad, but actually, when we need more oxygen, no, CO2 is great at soothing our nervous system. And when we breathe slowly and just like we are sleeping, it's the best for our nervous system. Okay, and like that. How do we create that state with our voice, with our body, with our posture? So our shoulders are relaxed more, our jaw is relaxed more. We can move our feet slowly. We can open our palms slowly, so we can send signals to our parasympathetic nervous system to activate and bring more soothing, more buffer, and more wonderful serotonin kind of hormones rather than cortisol. So that is a little tip on anger. Now, when we talk about negative emotions such as jealousy or envy, shame, and guilt, these are cocktails, as I said before. These are difficult emotions. Why? Because they are combinations. For example, jealousy could be a combination of anger, combination of fear, and sadness. Now, if we look at these three emotions, there's already adrenaline, noradrenaline, and melatonin. Together, it's a combustion. It's like a very juicy, strong, powerful emotion, evolutionary driven. Of course, it has all the rights to be, because evolutionary, we feel jealous and envious in order to keep our partner at bay, not to lose our partner, and to have that ability to procreate and for our offsprings to survive. Okay, so it has it has a good intention. Now, what happens when if we're not careful and we feel envious and jealous for no reason? For example, if our partner is faithful, if everything is good, but we still feel jealous, or if we still feel envious to others, and social media exacerbates this feeling big time. And it's proven that when we look at social media, most of the time we experience that feeling of envy, because we see others at a better state, because they only show good pictures and videos, and we think that that's their life. So we project and imagine something good about them and something bad about ourselves. Especially female brains do that. We have done studies in psychology, and we know that female brain more blames themselves so for bad things that happen in their life and project good things to others, whereas a masculine brain justifies their sort of mistakes by blaming others and taking credit for all the good things that happen in their life, much more skillful than female brains. Now, how do we deal with these cocktails of difficult emotions? We need to unpack them and take each emotion separately, like I did with the Enrich method, for example. But also there are very interesting practical ways to deal with jealousy and envy. One of the things that I love, and I took from a Buddhist tradition, actually, in monasteries, Buddhist monks are taught how to deal with these difficult emotions. And they're also people, they're surrounded by other people, and they experience jealousy and envy like we do. Now, what do they do to combat these difficult emotions? First of all, they start journaling and they pick up a person, for example, they feel envious or jealous about, and they write down, becoming aware of what that person does very well. Okay, noticing all the positive things and writing them down. For example, that person comes on time, or that person actually does an act of kindness more often, or that person smiles more, or that person positions or takes care of their hair. I don't know, whatever that you notice that the person does that really is good. Okay, and you notice and you write down and you write down and you write down, and it becomes a page or even double page, and suddenly you start noticing patterns of that person, and these patterns you can implement into your life, and it becomes a strategy. It becomes something that is an inspiration rather than point of jealousy, because once we write it down, we make it our own. You see what happens when we write? The skill of writing, not typing, but writing with a pen or pencil, we connect with a different part of our brain. And it's a very, very interesting trick that once we write, it's as though we are experiencing it ourselves. So in a way, congratulating, celebrating others, we are impacting and implementing and integrating that very skill into our life, okay? Even with imagination. That is the first step. In order to build a bridge, one needs to imagine it. One needs to imagine it, okay? You cannot build a bridge. You cannot build anything without imagining it. So that is a skill I want to have more of in our life in order to have more positive emotions. Imagining, right? How that person is doing the really good things. What is it that we're envious about? Oh, they've done this well, they've done that well. Oh, guess what? I could do a very simple thing like that because I've just congratulated and I opened the door. Okay, instead of jealousy and envy, I opened the door to gratitude and to this loving kind of kindness way. Meditation, embracing and sending positive vibes also works. And also thinking about ourselves rather than the other person. Most of the time, envy and feeling of jealousy happens when we focus too much on the other person. When we start gathering and gaining our energy and focus back into ourselves and comparing ourselves with ourselves of yesterday or the year before or the decade before and start measuring our own progress. Progress is an antidote of fear of failure or fear of success. Progress is what makes us humans happy. Okay, we're very cognitive beings. Our mind drives the show. Okay, all our emotions are experienced on the hormonal level in our nervous systems even before we make a decision, before we are aware of them. Okay, unconsciously and subconsciously, we are driven by our emotions, and our mind is so much more complex than what we think of it. Okay, so how do we deal with that? We start training it. And that's what Buddhist monks do. They train their mind to be a better tool to ride a show in a better way. Okay, so instead of feeling jealous and envy, why don't I feel gratitude for my own progress? And what I decided, for example, I disconnect more often from social media. I disconnect from people who trigger me for the time being. Now, once I feel good about myself and do progress on my own, then I can connect with those people as an inspiration point, not as a point of feeling bad about myself. Okay. So these are little tricks that also makes a big difference in the way how we deal with these emotions. And of course, understanding where that emotion and feeling comes from. For example, a lot of the time, it comes even before we were born. It could be that that kind of feeling and emotion traveled in our family system as a pattern. And as a transgenerational, intergenerational pattern, it can affect us without us knowing it. So working with that kind of feeling, if it's a shame or if it's a guilt, if it's a jealousy, if it's envy, if it's sadness, if it's a feeling of anger or fear, all these could be traced back generations. So doing some systemic work, doing a family constellation work, family reconstruction work, doing some sort of repatterning, systemic repatterning, that can help rewire the nervous system and give space to experience a new feeling and learn to practice a new state of mind. A new state of mind will also have a different impact on the behavior and the way how we make life decisions and choices, what kind of life we choose and we live. All of things that we live is a reflection of our choices in the past, right? If we take that responsibility, we can make a change. If we stay in the victim zone and say, okay, it's not me, it happened to me, well, then we'll keep living the same life. But if we can just look at it, that it happens for me, and this is a chance for me to change it and live a more fulfilled life, a better life, I can make a difference. That's the gem. That's taking control of the space where I can make a difference. And that is generally inside myself with my emotions and feelings. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I would love to hear more from you. And if you can't change an emotion or fear, what I love is one of the Hawaiian tradition, especially in relationship, right? Especially with jealousy and envy. I wrote down this Ho'oponopono, and I changed it a little bit. So what I say, if I cannot, change that emotion, for example, inside me, I imagine that person. If I feel angry with them or feel envious or jealous, and I say inside my mind, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you. Okay, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you. And miraculously, that changes the state, the way how I feel towards that person. So that can work as well for you. Thank you, and good luck applying these tools. That's all for today.